What's up, smarty people? It's KeysDAN with RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com, coming to you live in a living color from the Radio What studios. And this is my podcast, What Makes You Smarter? It's an extension of the RadioWhat.com internet radio station that I've been running for quite some time. And if you need DJ services, where do I always send you? DJLittleRock.com. One more time, DJLittleRock.com. Check availability and get a free price quote, and maybe you can have me at your next event. Also, if you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, I encourage you to check out my other podcast. It's called What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. Now, on with the show. Today on the program, we have history, historical facts. You know I like history. I like learning stuff. And while you're hanging out with me, learn stuff as well. Today's interesting fact or historical fact, 6 otherworldly facts about the space race. As tensions rose on Earth during the Cold War, the United States and Soviet Union also vied for celestial supremacy. The space race between the two superpowers began shortly after World War II and captivated the public until tensions finally eased in the 1970s. With the help of top scientists and talented pilots, Americans, Soviets, and other nations sought to do the seemingly impossible by conquering the final frontier, space, the final frontier. These decades were marked by scientific achievements and setbacks that make this space-obsessed era one of the most fascinating periods in the 20th century. Here are 6 facts about the space race. Number 1. Fruit flies became the first animal sent into space in 1947. Long before humans reached the stars, fruit flies became the first living organisms to be intentionally blasted into space. Beginning in 1946, the U.S. military conducted a series of experiments in New Mexico's White Sands Missile Range with future spaceflight in mind. Utilizing V-2 ballistic missiles, which had been seized from Germany by the U.S. after World War II, the government propelled biological samples such as corn and rye seeds as far as 80 miles into the sky, well beyond the 66-mile distance that NASA now considers the limit of outer space. On February 20th, 1947, a capsule containing fruit flies was affixed to one of said missiles and launched to a height of 67 miles above the ground. The flies were chosen to test the effects of cosmic radiation on living beings and were the perfect candidate for a number of reasons, including their small size, minimal weight, and a genetic code analogous to that of humans, containing similar disease-causing genes. As the rocket began its descent, the capsule detached and drifted back down to Earth using a parachute, and the flies remained alive and unaffected. How about that? Number 2. Apollo 12 was struck by lightning. In November 1969, just 4 months after Apollo 11 landed on the moon, the Apollo 12 mission took to the skies. But what was scheduled to be a standard launch experienced near disaster just 36.5 seconds into the flight as lightning struck the Saturn V rocket. The unexpected event disrupted the onboard control panels, causing astronaut Dick Gordon to confusedly exclaim, quote, "What the hell was that?" unquote, before another bolt struck the 52-second mark. Wow. Two strikes by lightning so far. With alarms blaring and equipment malfunctioning, the puzzled astronauts continued to troubleshoot the spacecraft while not fully understanding what had happened. Ultimately, the crew shifted the craft into auxiliary power that allowed the mission to continue as planned. Around 3 minutes into the flight, astronaut Pete Conrad wondered aloud if they'd been struck by lightning. And by the 11-minute and 34-second mark, the crew was successfully floating in space. With disaster averted, the Apollo 12 astronauts became the second group of individuals to walk on the moon. How about that? Number 3. Alan Shepard played golf on the moon. all you golf enthusiasts out there. While the harrowing stories of Apollo 12 and 13 are widely known, the Apollo 14 mission produced one of the most lighthearted moments of the space race. On February 6th, 1971, during a live broadcast of the Apollo 14 spacewalk, astronaut Alan Shepard produced a retractable 6-iron golf club and took 4 swings on the moon's surface. Given his bulky spacesuit, Shepard couldn't grip the club with both hands and swung it solely with his right hand, causing him to miss the golf ball and connect directly with the lunar surface on both of his first 2 swings. Shepard hit the ball with his 3rd swing, though it only traveled 24 yards. With his 4th and final shot, Shepard made flush contact and claimed the ball traveled miles and miles and miles. In reality, it only reached a distance of about 40 yards, though he remained airborne for longer than here on Earth, given the moon's lack of gravity, or lesser gravity. After returning to Earth in 1974, Shepard donated the golf club to the USGA Golf Museum in New Jersey, where it remains a popular artifact. How about that? Continuing on. The first joint U.S.-Soviet space mission occurred in 1975. Despite a heated rivalry that lasted more than 2 decades, the United States and USSR worked together on a joint space mission in 1975. The space race had been in full swing since at least 1955, when the 2 global powers announced their intention to launch satellites into orbit. The Soviets made history by sending the first man into space in 1961, and America landed the first man on the moon in 1969. After years of one-upmanship, tensions began easing in 1972 with the signing of a space cooperation agreement. On July 15, 1975, the nations jointly embarked on the Apollo-Soyuz mission, which served as a symbolic end to the decades-long space race. This mission included 2 separate space flights led by American astronaut Tom Stafford and Soviet cosmonaut Alexei Leonov, who later docked their crafts together in space and exchanged an international handshake. In the 1980s, talk of international space station, jointly managed by the United States and Soviet Union, began, and assembly of the spacecraft began in 1998. Wow. Keep going. Nations around the world joined the space race. While the history of the space race largely focuses on the United States and Soviet Union, other nations joined the fray in the late 1970s. The first non-American and non-Soviet pilot to reach outer space was Czech cosmonaut Vladimir Remek, who studied flight in Moscow. On March 2nd, 1978, Remek took off aboard the Soviet Soyuz 28 spacecraft and headed for the Salyut 6 space station, where he and his co-pilot conducted research for 8 days before returning to Earth. Upon his return, Remek was heralded as a hero by his native Czechoslovakia, now Czechia and Slovakia, paving the way for other nations to send humans into space shortly thereafter. Later that year, Polish pilot Miroslaw Hermanszewski and East Germany's Sigmund John both boarded Soyuz missions of their own. In 1980, the Soyuz program also sent the first pilots from Latin America, Arnaldo Tamayo Mendez of Cuba, and Southeastern Asia, Pham Tuan of Vietnam, into space. Fascinating. Keep going. Nobody has walked on the moon since 1972. If you were alive at the time, it's hard to forget where you were when humans first walked on the moon. While those vivid memories remain, it's actually been more than 50 years since someone last set foot on the lunar surface. In 1969, Neil Armstrong became the first of the 12 people, all Americans, who have set foot on the moon. The final moonwalk to date occurred just 3 years later as part of the Apollo 17 mission, with astronauts Eugene Cernan and Harrison H. Schmitt. They landed their spacecraft in the Taurus Littrow Valley, a narrow lunar opening deeper than the Grand Canyon. Wow. The pair explored the region for 7 hours a day and over the course of 3 straight days, and even suffered a minor accident in the process after Cernan accidentally dropped the hammer on their lunar rover. The astronauts also discovered orange soil as evidence of lunar volcanic activity, which proved to be one of the most important discoveries of any Apollo mission. Before leaving, they left behind a plaque that reads, quote, "Here man completed his first explorations of the moon," end quote. Nobody has returned to the moon since. How about that? I like that space. Are you nerdy on space as well? That's 6 otherworldly facts about the space race. Drop me some comments. Let me know what you think. Should we go back to the moon? Should we? I know they're planning on going back to the moon real soon. What do you think about all that? Should we take care of what's going on this planet first? Keep it political, right? All right. Comment, like, share, subscribe, all that kind of stuff. Maybe I'll read your comments on a future episode of What Makes You Smarter. That's it for this edition of What Makes You Smarter. If you'd like to tell your story or hear the stories of others, check out my other podcast. It's called What Makes You Famous. Find it everywhere using the hashtag What Makes You Famous. That's it for me. It's KeysDAN, RadioWhat.com, DJLittleRock.com. Peace. I'm out of here.